Chapter 14. As we strolled past another row of cages, I noticed several water hoses had been left running full blast, apparently by the kennel cleaners. The hoses were lying on the concrete, and the streams of water were each snaking their way toward a storm drain. I could see no kennel workers in the area and no reason for the waste. As we approached one stream, Mr. Cox, who seemed totally unconcerned and maybe even oblivious to any problem, simply stepped over it to keep his shoes from getting wet and continued walking as if it was perfectly normal. Having been responsible for paying my own utility bills for many years had caused me to notice things like this, even at other people's houses. I can't tell you how many times I had to remind my own children to shut the door or turn off the water or shut off the lights. I'm sure you understand if you have bills to pay. As I prepared to step over the stream myself, my curiosity got the best of me. "Mr. Cox," I began, "shouldn't someone shut off that water? It seems like a waste of resources to let it run if they are done, isn't it?" He paused a moment, looked back at the water hoses producing the streams, and then proceeded walking away and said, "Oh, the kennel cleaners will shut them off eventually. Don't worry about it. The more water we use here, the better it is for the small local utility company. Our utility bills are pretty high here. It helps support the local economy. Plus, the more we spend, the more we can ask for next year in the annual budget increase. It works out great for everyone. Conservation of resources is not a big concern for us here. We are too busy keeping the state safe from dangerous animals." I glanced back at the water pouring into the drain and had to stifle my conservative urge to run over and shut off the hoses myself. I looked at Mr. Cox, who was now 2 steps ahead of me, continuing the tour as if nothing had happened. I couldn't bring myself to believe this is really happening. The whole kennel system is a deliberate waste of tax dollars. How could a place exist where waste is rewarded? Do other government agencies and employees develop the same warped thinking over time? I wondered. Was I still in my home country, or had I somehow been transported to another planet in a dream and would soon wake up? The pitiful howl of a lonely puppy to my left snapped me back to reality. I wasn't dreaming. "Mr. Cox," I said, "do the children ever get to come and visit with their dogs?" "Oh, yes. After the dog has been here 30 days, he replied, smiling. "Our policy states that our goal is to keep the bond between dogs and families strong. We allow them to visit twice a week for 4 hours each time in the visiting area over there. However, the state is considering legislation which will cut the visitation time in half as a means to reduce the kennel's budget. But during the first 30 days of incarceration, the dog is not allowed any visitors. Some families drive 8 hours just to come see their dog. Sadly, many families just get another dog, and their old dog is left here alone for us to take care of. Unfortunately, the children rarely bond as well or enjoy the new dog as much. Usually the children still want to come see their old dog, but they are rarely brought here. Hundreds of these dogs never get a visit. Apparently, the families think that the bond with their new dog will get better by forgetting the old dog." As we entered the small, drab, unfurnished visiting area, I thought, there is nothing to do in here for the dogs or the kids. There were vending machines and chairs and a few tables, and that was it. The price on the vending machines caught my attention. $1.25 for a Coke. $2.25 for juice. That's outrageous. Why would anyone pay that instead of just bringing their snacks with them? Visitors are not allowed to bring food, Mr. Green. It's the policy of the Bureau Kennels. As for the price, that's a benefit for the staff. 85% of the profits go for staff recreation and 15% go to the BOK. Then what he had said earlier registered with me. 8 hours? I exclaimed without meaning to raise my voice. If the state has 14 kennels, I don't see how any dog can ever be locked up more than an hour's drive from its owner. Don't you put them in the kennel that is closest to their home? Of course we do, he said defensively. That is, if we have room. If the dogs cause trouble or break any kennel rules, we can move them across the state or to another state for punishment. Because of overcrowding, the dog can even be sent to a private kennel. However, if a dog is placed in a private kennel, he can be moved much farther away. For example, many of the dogs from Hawaii are sent to Arizona or Kentucky. Dogs from Kansas may go to Florida. The cage broker helps find a place for them. Private companies now transport thousands of dogs across the United States. The dogs may spend as long as a month on the road on their way to a private kennel. There are more laws regulating the transporting of cattle than there are for transporting these dogs, Mr. Green. Just remember, if the owner had kept their dog under control, we wouldn't be here. Chapter 15. What kind of things could a dog do in here that would make you move him far from his family? I asked. Oh, we have lots of rules in the kennel system, he said. Moving their food or water dish, barking too loudly, scratching the fence or gate, or possessing a leather chew toy. You know, things like that. Sometimes, rather than move them, we just take away their visiting rights as punishment. It's usually for only 6 or 12 months at a time. We have one dog over there in cage number 738 that tried to dig under his fence to escape. We took away his visiting rights and dog biscuits for 24 months. This was unbelievable. Why couldn't Mr. Cox realize how much permanent damage that particular punishment would do to both the dog and the family? Couldn't he understand that it would be natural for every dog to want to escape from this place? Not to go out and be dangerous, but to be back with a loving family? Oh, we have lots of rules in the kennel system, he said. Moving their food or water dish, barking too loudly, scratching the fence or gate, or possessing a leather chew toy. You know, things like that. Sometimes, rather than move them, we just take away their visiting rights as punishment. It's usually for only 6 or 12 months at a time. We have one dog over there in cage number 738 that tried to dig under his fence to escape. We took away his visiting rights and dog biscuits for 24 months. That was unbelievable. Why couldn't Mr. Cox realize how much permanent damage that particular punishment would do to both the dog and the family? Couldn't he understand that it would be natural for every dog to want to escape from this place? Not to go out and be dangerous, but to be back with a loving family? If a dog is sick, are the family members afforded any special visitation privileges? I asked. Oh no, he exclaimed. To the contrary, family members are not allowed to visit their dog in the animal hospital unless the dog is in critical condition, and then visitation is limited to only 15 minutes. Mr. Cox, I said, of all the things you can do to punish who violates rules, Why would taking away their family visits even be on the list of options? That seems so cruel. Letting families come visit causes problems for us. Some kids know their puppy is teething, so they sneak chew toys into the visiting area. Our staff even get bribed to smuggle them in once in a while. It's a real problem in here and takes a lot of our staff time to monitor. But hey, I don't make the laws. I just do my job. I just follow orders. I'd heard that before, but this time it sparked a question, so I asked, doesn't keeping these dogs locked up for long periods of time like this alienate them from their owners and make them less playful and more aggressive when they do go home? Mr. Cock wrinkled his eyebrows in thought and said, probably. Maybe that's why over 70% of the dogs return to the kennel within a year of getting out. The BOK developed policies to try and reduce the rate of recidivism to no avail. The other problem is the label they all get. Any dog that has ever been locked up will be labeled a felon for the rest of its life. He can't leave the state to go on family vacations without going through a lot of red tape. And if he ever goes to the city pound because his family rejects him, he will probably be the last ones adopted out, if anyone will take him. Most of the dogs seem real friendly and well-trained when they come, he continued. It's a real shame that 80% are abandoned by their families if they are here more than 10 months. The abandonment rate is even higher for female dogs. Unfortunately, the dogs are not allowed to develop new friendships with outsiders while they are here. The dogs are allowed visits only with people who knew them prior to their incarceration. If abandoned by their family, they are usually left here forgotten. It's the law. When they get out, without those relationships, they usually get into trouble quicker and end up back here. After they have been here for a while, they seem to change. They are less friendly and playful. Some even turn mean or even vicious. It's sad to see them get that way. Under the 3 strikes law, dogs that are caught a third time for the same offense are classed as incorrigible and sentenced to life. Do the staff officers ever abuse the dogs? I asked. It happens sometimes, when you're constantly around mean animals, he responded. Congress passed laws to try to reduce it, but those laws do not apply to the privately owned kennels. Are the staff punished? Mr. Green, most abuse is only considered to be a misdemeanor, not worth the trouble to charge them. Besides, the staff officers are like heroes in the eyes of the public, protecting society, and these are just dogs in here. Once, 4 guards were charged with the beating death of a female dog, but charges were dropped after they could not determine the time of her death. In Florida, 2 staff officers were acquitted for stomping a dog to death. That dog must have really been mean. Or the staff members, I thought. Do your staff members here ever show any affection to the dogs, like petting them, brushing them, or talking nicely to them? I asked. Many years ago, the kennel did that sort of thing, before the big change in philosophy, he replied. Chapter 16. What change in philosophy? In the 1970s, the kennel system was commonly seen as a way to rehabilitate and prepare the offending dogs to be returned to their families, he said matter-of-factly. We told our staff to be as nice as they could be to the dogs and help them in any way we could, because we felt that just being away from their home and family was punishment enough. We even had frequent training classes and allowed dogs to go home for weekend furloughs once a month. Then, About 25 years ago, the head of the Bureau of Kennels sent out a memo to all kennel keepers that the new philosophy was that dogs are here for punishment, and we were to look for ways to make them miserable so they would quit coming back. Nearly all training classes and furloughs stopped. I think the policy change came because of pressure from the right-wing conservatives whose slogan was "tough on crime." They were a powerful political force. It got to the place where you couldn't get elected without their support. A few thought we had gotten too tough on crime. For instance, the media did not like it when one of the training videos for a private kennel showed a seemingly compliant dog being kicked and shocked with the stun gun. But these techniques can be useful in breaking a dog's rebellious spirit. I still do not know how they got to see that video. Mr. Cox, do the staff ever shoot the dogs? I asked. Not here, we don't. Our state doesn't allow it. But at the Red Onion Kennel in Virginia, they do. But they only use rubber bullets inside the compound. During their first 9 months, they shot over 60 dogs, injuring 10. That instilled a fear in the other dogs, which should keep them in line. I was walking with him silently and thinking about all I had seen and heard, when we came upon a kennel worker carrying a huge sack of dog food toward the open trunk of his car. Inside the trunk there appeared to already be several sacks of dog food. Mr. Cox quickly looked away, veered off slightly to the left, and began. This is our own food preparation area. We provide well-balanced meals to keep the dogs healthy. It costs us about 85 cents a day to feed each dog. 85 cents a day? I exclaimed. How can you provide enough food at such a low price? Oh, it's very simple, Mr. Cox smiled. We get truckloads of food donated because it is past the expiration date. Very few of the FDA food laws apply to kennel food. Many of the other kennels are using private companies to feed the dogs. Many problems have been created by using a private company to feed the dogs. Several states now do this as a cost-saving measure, but lawmakers still want food costs reduced another 14%. When eating is perhaps the biggest pleasure in a dog's day, it's easy for fights to break out due to petty jealousies over food. There have been some problems with the private company in charge of feeding the dogs as well. They don't keep the food preparation area very clean. There have been some instances of maggots on the dogs' trays, and they have even been caught dipping spoiled meat in vinegar and water to remove the smell. Often they do not fix enough food for all of the dogs. When food portions are too small, a hungry dog can become a problem dog. But the state is saving money. Many companies send us outdated or slightly spoiled food. We get it for free, and they can write the full retail value off on their taxes. It works out good for everyone. Everyone except the dogs, I thought. Doesn't that pose a health risk to the dogs? Oh, maybe a little, but hey, they are just dogs. Besides, we have a long list of dogs already sentenced waiting to come here when we get space. We have no problem staying full. I remember back to my college history class where I learned how labeling people groups makes it easier to mistreat them. Communists labeled their opponents as enemies of the state. Hitler labeled Jews as inferior species, or criminals, or parasites. Blacks were called lots of negative terms during slavery. The whites called the Indians savages. The list was real long. And here I was today hearing they are just dogs. I was beginning to see the true picture and plan. It wasn't pretty. Chapter 17. I was still having a hard time believing what I was hearing and seeing. I must be dreaming, I thought. This can't be really happening in my country, the one my brother and I fought for and thousands have died for. How could anyone with a conscience be part of such a scheme and still sleep at night? Do the taxpayers really know what is going on behind this fence way out here next to nowhere? How could I tell them? What could they do? It was obvious to everyone that something must be done to get truly dangerous or vicious dogs off the street. But 1,600 dogs? 14 kennels in this state and over 900 kennels in the country? Chew toys? Conspiracy? 2 million dogs? Has everyone gone stupid at once? My mind was racing in all directions when I remembered the open trunk. What happens if a dog steals extra food from the food preparation area? I asked. Oh, that's a serious offense, he said. That dog would face new charges and get a longer sentence in the kennel, plus time in the shed. Do they have to go back to animal court to face the new charges? Rarely, Mr. Green. Our staff usually gets to decide if the dog is guilty and what the punishment should be. Do they have to go back to animal court to face new charges? Rarely, Mr. Green. Our staff usually gets to decide if the dog is guilty and what the punishment should be. We are trained for this, and the state trusts that our decisions will help keep the public safe from these vicious animals. Do the staff members ever steal food for their dogs at home? I asked as I looked back at the kennel worker loading the last sack of food in his trunk. There may be some petty theft by our staff, but we sort of look the other way and consider it part of their benefits, he said. After all, we are putting our lives on the line in here to protect the public from dangerous animals. I thought of the hundreds of lonely dogs we had seen today whining and begging to be loved. Some were very old and could barely stand up in their cage. I would say that way less than 10% could be called dangerous animals. Maybe years ago, when only dangerous animals were locked up, he would be correct to think by himself as a hero. But what I had seen today was mostly a huge money-making business. My mind went back to the new puppy in with the pit bull, and I silently prayed for him to somehow survive. I thought of all the hundreds of kids who were home crying right that minute because they missed their dog. I wonder how many more burglaries there were now because family watchdogs were locked up in here. As I thought back over the sights and sounds of the day, a tear welled up in my eye and trickled down my cheek. Mr. Cox saw it and said, I know. I get emotional too as I think about the brave staff we have working here to make the state a safer place. Mr. Cox, I said, what exactly are you trying to accomplish in the lives of these dogs and families? No other country on earth does this to the extreme our country does. What does locking them up for 7 months accomplish that they can't learn in 7 days? That's a great question, he said. I don't know of any good that comes from this place, except to provide a lot of jobs and take a few dangerous animals off the street. Local businesses benefit when families come to visit their dogs, as they often have to stay in the hotel and eat while they are in town. It also helps lots of local economies when the dog's time is up and he is released to the halfway house. The halfway house? I asked. What is that? Oh, almost all dogs are required to go for 60 days to a halfway house so they can be gradually transitioned back into society. The owner pays the halfway house $10 per day for the 60 days. Most dogs are really allowed to go home after only 10 days or so, but they must pay for all 60 days, Mr. Cox said. Then they can bring in more dogs to fill the vacancies. Wow, I said. They can rent the same space out to 6 dogs? What a lucrative place that is. That's why it helps the local economy so much. There are scores of these halfway houses around the state, he said, smiling. The taxpayers don't pay for that. The dogs get regular jobs, no NICOR, NICOR, etc. Chapter 18. I was stunned. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This whole system seems to me to be nothing but a giant money-making machine, and lots of people are in on it, I said. The welfare of the dog or the family is way down on the list, if it is even on it. Protecting the public from dangerous animals is only a smokescreen. You're probably right, Mr. Green. Money and politics intersect at Corruption Avenue. It's the nature of American politics. Even the Roman historian Tacitus stated back about 1900 years ago, the more corrupt the state, the more numerous the laws. There's nothing we can do about it, though, but do our job and pay taxes. I am both humbled and honored to have this job, knowing that I am helping keep our state safe from dangerous animals. We were walking slowly toward the massive gate. Mr. Cox paused a moment and said, "Well, our tour is complete. I think you have seen everything we have here. Do you have any other questions?" I looked at Mr. Cox. He seemed so professional, so methodical, so mechanical. I wondered if he had any feelings of remorse for the suffering he was bringing to families and dogs. I wondered if he realized how many ways he could help ease that suffering. Couldn't he hear the same lonely whines I was hearing? Couldn't he see the dogs shaking in fear? Couldn't he understand why kids cried as they left the visiting area each week? Would he even consider the idea that the problem was not the dogs or the families, but the laws that criminalize innocent conduct? Did he lobby to eliminate the ludicrous laws that cause nearly all of these dogs to be here? Did he ever consider the idea that the problem could be solved some other cheaper way, like fines or dog collars? Was it not evident that the love of money was causing most of this evil? How could he sleep at night? Do the taxpayers realize that what had started as a legitimate place for vicious dogs had grown into such a huge business? Do they know that only a few of the dogs really needed to be in here? And most were here over impractical laws or because of a system that rewards the DODC for convictions and not for seeking truth and justice. Everyone knows we need laws and crime should be punished. But this? Couldn't he see that most of these dogs should go home now, today, to their families? Couldn't he hear the children cry at night? What was happening to my country? Has everyone gone crazy at once? Did my countrymen see this fence as a good thing to prevent escape and never wonder why the dogs would want to escape? Couldn't America see, to paraphrase from Uncle Tom's Cabin, that this system was creating anguish and despair, breaking thousands of hearts, shattering thousands of families, and driving helpless people to frenzy and despair? Is this a thing to be defended, sympathized with, passed over in silence? What happened to the liberty part of life? Liberty and the pursuit of happiness. Would it be a waste of time to even mention my thoughts to Mr. Cox or Hans or Senator Jones, since they all made money off this kennel? The Senate could fix nearly all of this problem in one day. But why would they? How could anyone convince them to vote to eliminate part of their own income, power, and prestige? Has any politician in history ever done that? I cannot think of any. My mind was racing in all directions at once, and all I could mutter was, "I don't have any more questions, Mr. Cox. Thanks so much for your time." Mr. Cox shook my hand and smiled as he opened the huge gate for me. It shut behind me with the same heavy, heartless, mechanical, ground-shaking thud. Even though I was now outside, I still had a sick feeling in my stomach. I used to be proud of my country, but visiting this place shook my faith in our justice system. I slowly drove out to the main road where Bessie had wandered back into the middle. I stopped and watched her mindlessly chewing her mouthful of grass and staring at me with that same blank, non-thinking stare that only cows can give. I'm sure she had no clue that she had changed my life forever. The sun was setting, and I glanced over toward the kennel, where I saw a tiny reflection off the razor wire. I just sat quietly and gazed at it for a long time, and I wept. Summary. For centuries, the abuse of alcohol has created problems for the family. Some people believed that alcoholic beverages endangered mental and physical health. They also thought drunkenness helped some people commit crime. In 1917, Congress approved the 18th Amendment to the Constitution, which prohibited the manufacture and sale of alcohol and took effect in 1920. Congress also passed the Volstead Act, which established penalties for prohibition violations. The results of prohibition was not fewer people drinking, but more as people thought the law violated their right to live according to their own standards. Government grew bigger, trying to enforce the laws, and crime increased. Gangs provided most of the alcoholic beverages and warred with other gangs for control of the liquor state. It took a while for Americans to realize that the prohibition laws and the war on alcohol did more harm than good. So in 1933, prohibition was repealed with the passage of the 21st Amendment. Since we're in the summary, Lord willing, I'll continue this in another video. You can go to lulu.com to purchase the Kennel. It's $5.99, and it's in PDF format, so you can use it on your cell phone or your computer. Lulu is a reputable website. I bought it myself from there, and it's $5.99. You can also go to Free Kent Hovind to get additional information on what's going on with Kent Hovind right now.